Hello and welcome to RetireMentors. I'm your host, Rob Demasi.
And I'm Veronica Barbetta, and we're excited to encourage you to discover the life you want to live, not just the money you need to fund it. Our guest today is Bec Wilson, who's an expert on modern pre-retirement. Bec's written a bestseller, How to Have an Epic Retirement, as well as her latest book, Prime Time, 27 Lessons for the New Midlife. Bec's going to share with us some of her insights about life and pre-retirement. Bec, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Can't wait to share some of those insights.
Now, you're a leading authority on modern retirement, a retirement podcast host, so no pressure on us, and you've published 2 retirement-related books. So what inspired you to build a career around retirement in the first place?
Yeah, I was actually 34 when I started in this field, and I was doing marketing to corporates. And it's the craziest story because I had my parents turning 60 at the time. It was the era of BuzzFeed and brands like Mamma Mia and all sorts of digital media was arriving on the scene in 2013 in Australia. And I was telling corporates all the time that were doing things that they needed to look at the older generation as a big changing market. I was doing marketing strategy. And I was sitting there saying, do I want to be doing marketing strategy in 10 years' time, or do I want to be doing something important for this big changing demographic? And watching my parents, they were using their iPads, they were reading media and content and consuming it, and absolutely nobody was speaking to them. And I thought, well, I'm going to give it a try. I started writing content on the internet, and that turned into my first business in this space, which I did step away from 2.5 years ago. But it became the largest media company for over 60s in Australia over 10 years. And it had 100 over 60 bloggers writing for it, all telling their own stories.
So I know that most people worry about having enough money for retirement, but they don't really consider how they might spend their time after full-time work. And the most common question we get as a super fund is, how much do I need? But we believe there are so many more questions that people need to ask before that. So what questions do you think people should be asking?
Well, there's a really important question that comes before that question, and it's one I don't think any of us realise just how important it is, and that is, what does my life look like? Like, if you can't picture it for yourself yet, then you can't ask how much it costs. And you can't figure it out. And even if you go and see a financial advisor, they can't tell you, even if they have templates and have seen it all before, they're still not then giving you the life you want. They're giving you the life a recipe says exists. So I don't think we want to be a recipe. I think we each want to figure out what we can do, what we can't do, what's in our ideal bucket, and then try and shape a life we want. So I would start with, what does it look like? And in fact, the whole first part of my book, you don't get to money till chapter 3 in Epic Retirement, because there's no point starting with money. We have to start with what the big picture of life looks like, how long you're going to live, because we even blow that up in the way we think about life today. We think about it using what I call old templates, ones that are built on old retirement concepts, and therefore we expect to grow old too early. And therefore we become incurious, which is why I love what you're doing here, right? And becoming incurious slows down your life. It makes it boring. And, you know, I just think we can give everybody a jolly good shake to look at life the way it really is for the current generation retiring. Because you can't look at an 80-year-old today and see what's in our future. You have to imagine it, and that gets me super excited.
Yeah, because I guess that's the point, really, isn't it? That retirement is not the same for everyone. You know, before you go to the question of how much do I need, you need to sort of work out, well, how are you going to spend your time? What are you going to do with your time? Are you going to spend it traveling? Are you going to stay home, look after the grandkids? Because one lifestyle might need a whole lot more money than the other.
And frankly, I want to do all those things, right? I think, you know, we've got to imagine all the different parts of life that we want. And I just feel there's a structure to how you can look at those things and work through them and go, yes, I want a long life. Therefore, I want to live in better health for that period. So I have to do something today to ensure that happens, right? I want to hang out with my grandkids every school holidays like my parents did all the way through their childhood. Even though they travelled as well, they would be home in time to do that bit. And they were the funnest grandparents to young kids. And those kids have really embraced having cool grandparents and both have got the reward, right? That it's not just the kids that got the reward of that. The grandparents absolutely have a sense of purpose that they never had when they had us as kids, right? In their parenting years.
Well, that's what we see from our members. They work hard all their life to have savings for retirement. They want to enjoy it.
They do. And I think, to your point, lots of our members talk about retirement as this full stop and this end goal, but they haven't actually thought beyond that, and they haven't thought about what they want. And I like your analogy of the recipe. It's not one size fits all. It really does depend on the individual, and I think that's what members struggle with. It's wonderful to be having this conversation.
And I just think we have to keep cracking this stuff open, because the more we talk about it, I know from having a community around me, those people they open the box and then they realise all the things they could do, and then they start to get even more excited, and then they see more, and then they try more, and that, you start out retirement thinking, your box is getting smaller, but there's so many ways to find fulfillment and purpose without money. In fact, I think sometimes the people with less money do that better because they are more proactive about community building, and it's a wild generalisation, but I just watch people who have nothing but are very busy in their retirement, really fulfilled in their communities, because that's how they get an engaging time.
Well, that's the thing. Back in the day, retirement was viewed as a 5 or 10 year time period, but touch wood, it could be more likely 30 years these days. So it's not just the decisions that you make at the time you retire, but all the decisions you continue to make throughout your retirement.
Well, I love that, because I don't think we talk about how life changes over this period very much now. And you think about how much your life has changed in the last 10 years, all right? It keeps changing. And in fact, in the second half of life, I actually think we get harsher changes, because we do get health crises. We do lose loved ones. We do many more things go wrong in the second half of life than in the first half, sadly. And that then becomes more things we have to manage on top of a changing earnings type, a different way of doing purpose.
So let's talk about Prime Time, your latest book.
Oh, yeah.
So according to your book, we're now living longer, saving smarter, that's a good thing, working more flexibly and seeking more meaning. So with all of that, what do you think a good retirement looks like?
Absolutely. I'd like to walk you through the structure if I can, because I always come back to this structure because it helps everybody grasp the real breadth of how much content is here. Otherwise, I sound like I jump around all over the place, and because there's so much to cover, and 27 lessons are in this book. But when I dig it apart for speaking gigs, depending on who I'm speaking for, I actually think there's about 180 lessons in the book, micro lessons that are like little takeaways. I could turn it into TikToks, I reckon. So really the first lesson in everything I do, everywhere I go, is I get people to think about life length, right? If you haven't thought about the fact that a 50-year-old today has a life expectancy of 94 for men, 95 for women, and 98 for a couple if you're in the 75th percentile. And I think if you've got slightly more wealth than the average person, which I'm imagining a UniSuper member does, and you look after your health, you're going to want to be in the top quartile, right? And we're all going to strive for the top quartile. But I also think health in the future is going to change, and we're going to see improvements over the next 25 years. So that's using the 25-year mortality improvement numbers. So if you're going to live to 94 or 95, or at the upside 98, you're at your half-life at 47 and a half, right? So not a concept we've got built into our brains. We thought our half-life was somewhere around 38 or 40, I think, the way we map our lives. You come back from there and you say, okay, the government tells us in the burden of disease study that we'll spend a total of between 10 and 11 years in poor health, but not all of it at the end. So about 5 to 6 years will be spent at the end of our life in poor health. So we're coming back down. Poor health starts around about 88 if we look after our bodies. There's a couple of years at the end, maybe 2 years of frailty where we might need care. So now we're back at a meaningful health span of between now, wherever we start this journey, and it could be 50 we start looking at our retirement, it could be 65. Hopefully we can wake more people up at 50. It's my goal with the Primetime book, because you can only do so much to help people at 65. Fix the money part. You can fix all the other parts at 65, but you can't make compounding work faster for them if they don't have the beautiful thing called time, right? So we come back and we teach people about how long their life is. And then we come to money, because when you can see how long your life is, you start to break it down into these pillars and say, okay, well, how healthy do I want to be? Well, am I going to take up daily exercise then? I think it's after you've set all your goals, you can then talk money. But we do have to do a skim across all the goal setting first. So we work through, where do I want to travel? Do I want to travel a lot in the first 15 years? Maybe before I'm 80, go hell for leather on the travel. Maybe before I'm 75, I want to do heaps of travel. Maybe before I'm 70, I want to do heaps of active travel. And then I just want to do cruises and tours after that, right?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with having a bit of understanding that our physiology will decline and think about our goals in a reasonable and achievable manner. And then once I'm 80, I'm going to have to think about my healthcare and my needs then. Okay, now I move on to my purpose and I understand my goals for my purpose. Do I need to have extra funding available for those things? Do I want to be able to get out and do stuff every week, do a French class, join a local French group, and then maybe that French group goes to dinner once a month and talks French at dinner, and then maybe they all go on a trip to France once every 2 or 3 years together. I mean, these are the things we can do if we think about expanding our curiosity. And so we start to build goals and we start to say, okay, I need to be able to afford my goals. Okay, now I've got a budget. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't do it like a financial advisor. I teach people the things they need to know so that they can go and get advice, knowing what they need to know sitting on the other side of the table from the advisor, so that they can actually rationalise what's good advice and know what they should implement, because the biggest risk when you go get advice is that the paper sits on the table afterwards and you never do anything with it. We got to understand it.
So, yeah, when it comes down to it, the financial side of retirement, obviously very critical, very important. You really can't escape it. But there are plenty of other things people can be thinking about before they wind up full-time work. For example, we did some research to better understand purpose in retirement. And what really stood out to me was that 3 out of 10 Australians, they're delaying their retirement because they're fearing losing that social connection. And I'm just curious, Bec, when you speak to members of your community, do you see that? Do you feel that social connection and purpose have become more important to them?
Yeah, very much. But I also think there's a generational shift coming through what retirement is. And it's why I've written 2 different books. And they are different in the tone and the way I speak to it. And that's because at 60 or 65, you can see the R word in your life. If somebody says to you, you want to prepare for retirement now? You go, oh, yeah, I wouldn't mind a bit of that. Right? And you're happy to come and learn. But if I say to you at 50 or 53, you want to come and learn about retirement? I'm not retiring, not for ages. I'm not going to do that. Why do I need to do that? But if we prepared you for something different, if we did, and I have done a little column on this, because I saw your report come through and I thought this is a bit newsworthy and I think we should talk about it. I really feel like we need to help younger generations, and not real young, but when those kids start to fly free, you start to wonder who you are again. You start to get a little bit of money back in your wallet. And if we don't catch you then, you start to find ways to spend it, right? And so we have an opportunity to catch people then and explain the big rules of how to nail an excellent pathway, but not a pathway to retirement. It's a pathway to having the freedom to choose and choose the whole path through the next stage of life. Like you might want to work till you're 70, or like you might want the option to pull the pin when you're 63. But if you've done the work when you're 53, you can almost guarantee that you'll be in that position just through the government's compulsory contributions being invested correctly in super and looked after by your fund, and then you having goals, right? And your goals might change. Your life circumstances might change. But if you don't have the power of choice, you're not actively engaged with your finances, your goals, your position in life, you don't have choice. Choice, I looked it up in the dictionary so that I could explain it to people. It simply means that when you hit a turning point, you have 2 options. 2 options, right? What happens if you get made redundant from your job at 58 and you haven't done the work on your finances? You don't have 2 options, right? That makes my hair stand up on the back of my neck. But that is what I want to teach people is, and 31% of people in Australia right now retire by choice. So we are in a time where funds, where members, where people on the street are retiring because they have to, and they're learning about the R word by default, by accident, and they're going, well, I guess I have to retire because ageism is keeping me out of the workforce. I haven't sorted my finances out, so I don't have choice. I have to wait for the pension. You know, we're still in a travesty of a situation here in this country. So if we can start 15 years ahead for the next generation, my goal is 75% of people retire by choice in 10 years' time, right? I think that's a achievable outcome for us.
It's an incredible switch. If it's quite shocking, isn't it? 30% of people only retire by choice. And
we don't think life is like it is when we're living it, right? And therefore we ignore the R word because it's a dirty word for younger people. And I don't want to change the word because it's a great word for people who are 65. It means something really special to them, and we don't want to take that word away. But why don't we give you a different way of thinking about the whole of the midlife and even the whole of your second half of life? And, you know, we do actually have templates for the first half of life. You think about it, they're not broken. Younger generations might think they're broken, right? Where you come out of school, you do your education, you get a job, you buy a house. I know that's a hard one for people to hear, but buying a house is still the greatest way to create wealth in Australia, the largest way to get the way to get the largest amount of leverage and capital growth over your lifetime. And you know, you get to get it out, capital gains tax free, and you can put some in your super, even in your downsize, right?
Happy days.
It's an actual winner for everybody if we can get them on the ladder, and then super can help them. Then the government can help get them into super when they retire. And that whole concept of the templates for up to 50, they work quite well. It's once we hit 47 and a half that there's actually zero templates. Ageism gets us. We tell people they can't work longer in the workplace even though they can add incredible value. Right? So I just think we've actually got to break a few of these things that are predisposed thoughts in our minds and create new templates across society for working longer, for saving earlier, for thinking about the goal. Is the goal actually retirement or is the goal to have choice at every major turning point in our 50s and 60s and 70s?
That's amazing. Choice, freedom, templates. You've spoken about so many things. What tips do you have for people who need a roadmap for retirement, that sort of thing?
Yeah, look, I'm all about the roadmap. I really think this stuff is hard to listen to in a conversation because it's so complex. And I might have brought up 5 concepts people don't actually have any background on. They're all in my books. If you want to read them, and I think they do need a bit of soaking in. You kind of got to go, oh, I don't even understand the language they're speaking today. Or, well, you know, this is the language of the second half of life, and we have to teach people the language. So my tips for people who need a roadmap is to think about it methodically. Come back and think about the big picture. Get in there and do some imagining. You know, I run this course online, and it's been amazing to watch people come back with feedback on it saying, do you know, I sat with my partner to do it and he didn't really want to do it and she did, or the other way around. And we had the most amazing conversations about what life looked like, about what we thought our goals might be, that weren't even I sat down and did a goal planning conversation or I had a financial planning meeting, but they started to really draw a picture together. And even single people start to say, you know what, I built a shape of where I want to go. That's the first step. There isn't actually a go off and see a financial planner first, because a financial planner, I believe, a good advisor, will still wait for you to come to the boiling point where you bubble up with ideas. And they need you to be bubbling with ideas. So if not, they've got to try and bubble you. And these are financial experts, not imagination experts, right? So, you know, you come in with a picture, even a simple picture. It doesn't have to be correct. The advisor will then help you work through. And so the second step is understand your money, understand how it works, understand your assets, liabilities, income and expenses. That sound like an accountant, but they are all very important things. It's called your big financial picture in prime time. And then understand the 3 new lessons of midlife, and they are really simple to break down. We need to understand time and how time works in the second half of life. We need to understand how income works in the second half of life, because it works differently. We don't get a paycheck anymore. We all of a sudden move to this phase where we're layering income streams. And that sounds complex, but it's not. It's really simple. First, if we're eligible for the age pension, that's actually the first thing we work out when we do the finances. If you're eligible, then that's the first layer for most people. On top, we have our superannuation, and we work out how we're going to generate one or two different types of income from that, depending on the way we use it. And, that's where you come to your super fund and get advice on how to do that. Then you've got maybe still income from working. Dare I say that out loud? I think people can work much longer if we can work in the right industries, and you guys serve people who are academics who work for the passion, right? And do things they love and don't necessarily want to retire from those jobs. They might want to ease off though. They might want to start choosing how often they work. They might want to get picky about who they work for. And that's fun when you have the power of choice, right? So you start to get to work through, okay, now I understand money. And then the other lesson, the third lesson of midlife is spending. So there's actually a theory that is we are probably going to spend higher and more evenly throughout our lives if we are comfortable, and we only ever drop our spending if we're uncomfortable, and that maybe baby boomers are going to prove that they like a higher standard of living than previous generations. And maybe Gen X is going to spend more again, right? We don't know. So then those are your three big money lessons. And then there's all the other ones. There's how to bring the others to life, your health, your happiness and fulfillment, and put that methodology together and think, okay, I need to see the whole picture of what my life looks like, because the money enables all the rest, right? It's you don't need money to have anything but more. There's actually a baseline that you need to live comfortably, and then the other things are like travel and spending, luxuries, right? But you can live a very happy life by getting the fulfillment exercises right.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson for our members, for the community, that money's not the end goal, money's the enabler.
So look, Bec, before we wrap up, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss today that you think people should hear or know about?
Oh, I have one. It's a concept I introduced in Primetime because I needed to try and explain to people how this new midlife phase works before retirement. And I'm speaking from my own sense of what I want out of life when I wrote it. I really was trying to imagine a life I want to live and how I would go about it. And then I checked it out with all the experts to make sure I wasn't nuts. And so I broke your prime time down into three phases. The phase, I see your prime time as starting anywhere from 47 and a half-ish, when those kids start to fly free and you start to, I guess, feel a bit of a personal awakening, a desire to have choice, a hunger. You don't know when that's going to be triggered in you. And funnily enough, the science says it could be triggered anywhere between 47, 47 and a half and 55. And that it gets triggered by a redundancy, a change, an age, a birthday, whatever, right? A divorce, anything could trigger it, that need for a sense of purpose. But then you go looking. You start to go, oh, I want a different. I got to go find it. So I break this phase of life down into three pieces so that we can see how to put it together. And I'll start with the first one, which is called the setup phase. I don't believe any of us are properly in a good position when we leave adulting and come into our pre-retirement decades, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have to go through a bit of work to get the mortgage into shape, to pay down the debts that we have when we're coming in, to understand our super, and to think about what our goals are for the next phase. Not necessarily know where retirement's going to land us, but think about how we want to live our life through our 50s and our 60s, and when we think retirement might be anyway in our lives. What our picture, are we a retirement denier? It's okay to be one, right? That just means we structure for a longer working life and we think about it. And then the setup phase allows you to get the groundwork in, okay? And you go do all the financial work, you do that big picture. Then you move into what I call, and this life stage isn't available for everyone, but I suspect your members will have this lifestyle available to them. And it's called lifestyling. Right? And that is a phase of life, I believe, where we can work full-time, knowing our money is compounding for us in our super fund and we're getting our 12% put in, and we've done a bit of the early years of putting a bit extra in, and we know our mortgage is in shape, and then we can move into a phase where we're spending some of that extra cash where the mortgage is gone on having trips while we're working, having a sabbatical, having a longer holiday, taking long weekends and going to the grand final if I live in Queensland, right? So they're fun things to do, living it up a bit, right? I've taken up doing a hike a year somewhere in Australia that I just exercise for 6 months and then go and do. Finding challenges and adventures and stuff, but not saying I'm going to wait till retirement to lifestyle. You can only do that if you've chosen to do your setup phase, right? Otherwise, you're frivolously spending money that you might have to have a plan for. And that's not what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating for doing this with awareness of your money. And then I think we should be building in a part-timing phase before we retire that can be long, that can be slow, that can be gradual, and that allows people to have power over their journey into retirement to gradually work a replacement of their sense of purpose from paid work by dropping a Friday out and saying, I'm not going to work Fridays anymore. I'm going to go and find purpose in that. And that might be when I take my French class up and all of a sudden I build a community of people I get to know who aren't at work, and I have people that I go on holiday with. And it's for single or couple people, I think it's really important to have these purposeful pursuits outside work. And I often talk about hobbies not being enough. If you're not investing in learning, you're missing out on something. And often we fall back to hobbies in this phase of life. And I'm like, nah, what are you paying for to learn and develop yourself in? So part-timing for me comes before retirement. I know we also talk about working in retirement. For me, that's about when we want to say the word retirement fits us. Retirement is something I believe happens when we stop working for paid work, not when we start accessing our super. And I hope one day the government changes the definition and calls it superannuation access day, not retirement day. And we can start to build a narration around work being longer and not dirty, like not a dirty word to say that. Work is a wonderful thing for your sense of purpose, a wonderful thing for your community and sense of belonging. And if you're in the right workplace, that is. And I think we can architect people to have a much more pleasant path into retirement if we can talk about it in workplaces more, if we can get workplaces supporting their employees into the phase of part-time, like we managed to turn it around for mothers in this country, right? We really have. And I think we can turn it around for retirees in the workplaces over the next period as well.
So to recap, you talked about the setup phase, the lifestyling phase, and the part-timing phase.
That's it. And then you have an epic retirement.
Bec Wilson, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've covered a lot today, but if people want more information, where can they find you?
BecWilson.net is the easiest way to find me. I do lots and lots of things. So I have a podcast called Primetime, 2 books, both bestsellers now, I'm pleased to say. And we're certainly there's a column in the Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, and all the 9 newspapers every weekend. There's so many little bits and pieces. But yeah, a newsletter that comes out for free as well from epicretirement.net. My goal is to just give freely and help people navigate this phase and, you know.
Thank you, Bec, for all that you do. A big thanks to Veronica also.
Thank you.
Until next time.
This podcast is general in nature and doesn't take into account your financial situation, needs, or objectives. The information isn't intended as advice, financial or otherwise, and shouldn't be taken as a recommendation of any financial product or investment strategy. The views expressed are anecdotal and don't necessarily reflect the views of UniSuper. So before you make any decisions about your super, we recommend you seek financial advice first. Also, make sure you've read the product disclosure statement and the target market determination that's relevant to you. They're all available on our website.